first going to do an offset turning demo, and then afterwards we're going to do a whole bunch of show and tell. Sorry. Just that was your intro, Bert. Oh yeah.
Well, let's see if I can make this thing squeal again. I hope not. Yeah, I hope not. Can everybody hear me? Does that make a difference? Okay, I'm just going to test it again with the face shield. This thing is set really, really small. Stu, were you at my shop?
No.
Or can you still hear me okay now?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so tonight we're going to talk a bit about offset turning. I don't know if I'll turn a project from start to finish, but some of the examples of offset turning could be something like this. This is on 2 centers. This one was my Koslov. That's what introduced me to offset turning, and it's a lot of fun. So passing some around. So there's a lot of different ways to do offset turning, and I'm going to show you a few of the tips and tricks and some of the jigs that I've picked up over the years. And I made this one the other day with something called the sorbing wobble chuck. And the sorbing wobble chuck is a little metal device that looks like this. Which camera are you on, John? Okay, so let me know. I can't see on the angle, I can't see what's there. But basically this thing has an angled piece, and you can loosen it and turn it, and I'll show you how that works in a bit. One of the other things I was turning a while back that's offset is these little offset ducks with a magnet in them. And then I tried to learn how to make a duck with tail feathers. And this one's really easy to do. It's offset turning. This one is a real challenge because I don't know how many of these I ended up making before I got one that had tail feathers. So one of the other chucks, commercially made chucks, is called an Axminster. And this little device is a offset turning jig. It fits into a standard chuck, dovetail chuck, and on the face it has 12 divisions around the barrel, plus it has 4 divisions left and right to tilt it off axis. So not only can you turn this off axis to make it, I'll show you how that goes, it goes round and round, plus you can turn the center to get something like this. So this one here is just using the offset holes on the back, and this particular one was used by rotating the barrel. And I didn't do all 12, I just did a few samples just to show that it's possible. Again, this is another example of something turned using this chuck. And it's got both the offset and a little bit of the changing the center. So these are just little sample pieces, but they make great Christmas ornaments if you use exotic woods or different kinds of woods, or use a little bit of paint. You can put paint or dye on the grooves and then sand them off, and then the little paint stays in the grooves and it gives you a completely different look. Now this little example here is just a piece of wood that I mounted on the lathe, and I put some V-grooves in. And how many people can put burn lines on a piece of wood that's mounted in the chuck? It's going end grain. Most of the wire burners I have handles on them, and they go really well on this surface to spin. So Stu came up with this idea, and we put a piece of piano wire in the end of a piece of wood, and when this piece is spinning on the lathe, put a V-groove in. You just take your little handle here and put the piano wire on your V-groove and push it in until it smokes, and it makes really, really nice end grain burn lines.
You ever tried
Yes, I used to use outright all the time. I'm still talking about this one, but I'll pass this around. So one of the things I noticed with a lot of tools, when you set them down on a table, they tend to roll away. But if you put an offset on them, you can set the damn thing down on the table and it'll just rock and won't go away. So that's one of the practical uses of doing an offset turning. So that's just a wire. Another example is this one here is turned on two centers, and again when you lay it down, it stays where you leave it. If you took a regular tool, round tool, it tends to want to roll away. So I'm going to end up remounting this and put some fancy things on here like this, just to keep it from rolling away when I set it down. How many people make small stools or have ever tried to make a small three-legged stool? A lot of times you make just straight legs. Well, if you want to add a little pizzazz with offset turning, you can make a dog-footed leg. And that's done on two centers. There's just a little bit of a dog leg on it. The real challenge with making dog-legged legs is to try and make three of them the same. If you put them side by side, you can definitely see that these are not all the same. But I've only made about half a dozen of these totally, and I've learned a couple of tricks on how to make them the same a little better. But that's always the fun, is to just take a piece of 2x4, pine, spruce, whatever, real inexpensive wood, and practice. Right?
2 dozen of them, you're guaranteed at 3.
You haven't seen the way I turn. I can make one of anything. It's making the second and third that are the challenge. Without practice. So, okay, so get into some of the chucks. Simple chuck. I showed you the metal commercially made chucks. They're great. They're great for repetitiveness. This is a chuck that I made a version of this a while back. There's a fellow from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. He came up with this idea, so we call it his Duxbury chuck. It's a piece of 2x4 maple. It's got a hole drilled in it. You make a fitting spigot to go in here. You clamp this between the jaws of a chuck. Take 2 jaws off of your chuck, clamp this in the chuck. It will squeeze this down to grab this, and then you can double stick tape or hot glue or CA glue, whatever, your workpiece on. If you put a workpiece like this, you could glue it on there, and this thing would spin in your lathe, and you can do whatever you want. Then when you want to change the embellishment, you loosen the chuck jaws and you move this over a little bit. I'll show you how this thing works in a chuck. I don't know if I'll pull a chuck apart to do it, but we'll use the other ones first. The important thing to note here is this is homemade. This didn't cost me anything. It took me a little bit of time and on the bandsaw to cut a slot. So most of the things we're going to show you that I'm turning with a commercial chuck, you can actually do with a piece of wood. Like you can make your own chucks. The only caveat I would say when you're making one of these is, don't ask me how I know this, is that if you get a bit aggressive with one of these, there are a whole bunch of pieces that can fly all over your shop. So you want to make sure if you make one of these that you use good wood, right? And don't make it too big, and don't get too aggressive when you're putting your piece of wood on it. I made the mistake of putting a piece a little bigger than this, and it was just a little bit too big, and it ended up splitting this chuck, and it didn't go very far, but it woke me up. And I thought, yeah, I'd want to make sure I'd let people know that if you're going to make one of these, just be careful.
What's the piece of white glue to the top of it?
Glad you asked that. On this one here, I have this little piece of wood. And so when I was making stuff with these, I'd have it in the chuck, and I'd want to move it over a defined amount. And if I'm making 3 or 4 things, I'd want them all the same. So with the chuck grabbing this, chuck is grabbing this on here, right up against the block. And when you want to move it over, you move it over. This here is, I think, 4 millimeters, and this is 6 millimeters. So if you want a 4 millimeter offset, you use that, and then close your chuck. And if you want to change it again, you put the wider part in, and then clamp it with your chuck. So then when you're turning, the chuck is that far away from that block. And if you want to go back to original, you just take this, loosen it, and push it right back against the block, and it goes back on center. That's the theory. And it works pretty good. Again, as long as you're working with small work pieces.
You want to talk about the index lines on the front of that?
That's, well, the index lines on here I put on because the commercial ones have really good indexing. So if you started this, you're turning with this index line on one of these, and you wanted to turn it, you can set it at whatever number of marks you want and do some turning, and then clamp it again and turn it. So that's your wooden indexed chuck. Who designed it? A fellow by the name of Jim Duxbury in Lancaster. On Thursday mornings, there's a, we call it Lancaster Coffee Hour, and a bunch of us get together at 8 o'clock our time, and it runs for 1 hour. They call it coffee hour. They start at 10 o'clock Eastern time, and they shut it off at 11 o'clock Eastern time, so it runs for an hour. Some of us log on a little early, but we've got a small group of people, about 35 or 40, I think, Jeff, pretty much regulars. It changes. I've seen as many as 60 on in the morning. And it's just a bunch of guys like us just sitting around having coffee. It's on a Zoom call. And it's been going on for 219 weeks. So they started just before COVID and just kept on going. So it's a lot of fun. A lot of the projects that I've been working on are inspired by some of the people that are on there. Another homemade chuck. I'm a tool junkie, so I like having chucks and tools and stuff. But a lot of times I didn't buy all this stuff all at once. But if I found a need for something, then I would justify it to myself to buy the chuck. This particular chuck is it's an offset chuck, but it's designed to make these. I don't know if you've seen, who's that German fellow that does these? Hans Weislog. He does a lot of the spider bowls where they'll be circular on this side, and this side they're off center, and you cut halfway through from both sides. And you can make this for an insert on a potpourri bowl or a garlic bowl or something where you need to have airflow, where you want to ventilate the box. You can make these, and it makes them kind of pretty to have those on the outside. In order to make them, you start off with a chuck like this, which the backside is designed to fit. On mine, it's my number 3 jaws on a one-way, and I can grab this. And this hole is a little over 2 inches, so I turn my discs. I'll take a blank like this and roughly turn it down to 2 inches so that this chuck can grab it. I'll grab it in my chuck, and then this is on center, so I can turn these rings. Then I take this piece out, make another chuck, but on this chuck, I've drilled the hole offset. So I've taken the blocks, and I thought I had some that weren't drilled. But anyway, I drilled the hole offset, made this to fit my chuck, drilled the hole offset, so when I'm done turning the one piece on the center line, then I put it in this chuck, and I can turn it again, and I get these offset circles. The downside to this particular one is I made the recess so deep that when I was cutting the offset ones, it actually cuts the chuck. So the chuck has these little grooves on it. It probably won't work for more than 1 or 2 go-rounds. So what I've done, I think I have another one here. I thought I did. So what I did when I made the second go around is I made another chuck, thinking that if the recess is too deep, then when I cut the second set of grooves, it'll cut the chuck. But on this one, you notice that the workpiece is, when I get it set right, it'll set proud of the disc. So this will still be chucked in my chuck. I have number 3 jaws and number 4 jaws at home, but you can grab this in a chuck. This hole is slightly size on size for this blank, and if it's too loose, then I just take the bandsaw and cut another groove on there until this can clamp this wood tightly. And then because it's offset, when I spin it on the lathe, it cuts the grooves, but I'll only cut halfway through, so I won't mark the chuck. So I learned that lesson by doing this one first and ended up cutting my chuck. So I decided, well, I'll make another one, and now I can use this chuck over and over and over again, and it doesn't hurt anything. And again, the on-center one is similar in that the on-center one has a step in here that is half the thickness of the wood. So when I'm setting it up on the lathe and doing the cutting, I only cut halfway into the wood. And then with any luck at all, that'll work. We'll see if this will work for us tonight. This one kind of falls apart, the plastic buster, give you a chance to see what it does. Any questions so far? I know there's lots of things to think about. And when I was at home trying to think what I was going to do this demo, I was trying to figure out a good way to explain what these things were, and I was going to take each one and explain it as I went. And then I started to sit back and think a bit, thinking, Don Smith from the UK, when I did a demo for their club last month, they thought it was great. We had a lot of fun doing a demo, and he came back and he said that everybody really appreciated the fact that when you started your demo, before you did anything, you had a safety moment. Well, we didn't have a safety moment here, but we will. But he said what he really appreciated was I showed them what we were going to do, and then I told them what I was going to do, and then I did it. And luckily, nothing flew off the lathe. But the whole group came back and said that they really appreciated seeing what the end product was before the demo ever started. He said so many times they'll have somebody demonstrate something and they're watching him turn and it's really intricate and it's really interesting and they have no idea where he's going, right? So now, hopefully, I've taken that to heart, that now when I start doing the demo, I try and tell people what I'm going to do before I do it. And then they kind of know where I'm going. Even if I don't get there, they'll know where I was trying to go. So, simple and easy. First things first is between centers. So basically, a simple handle. You might have noticed when I got here, I made sure that the lathe was actually sitting down on the ground, because with it off center, this thing would wobble around quite a bit. So a lot of people look at their wood and say, well, they want to put everything on center. This one here actually has dimples in it. But when you're making a handle and the handle is substantially bigger than what your handle is going to be, getting it perfectly on center really doesn't matter, because you're going to make it round anyhow. Most importantly is to get it somewhere close so that you've got enough wood to make the handle. What I do when I'm doing my off-center turning, I've watched so many people do it, and they say, well, they'll measure off and mark so many millimeters off-center on one side or the other, and I hate measuring. So what I do is I put my piece of wood in here, jammed it between centers, And when I take it off, you'll notice on the end of the stick there's a hole and there's a little ring. That little ring's about 5-6 millimeters off center. And if you look on the other end, you can't quite see it. So I turn it around and I push it in again. From this particular live center has a bigger point on it than my safe drive. It sticks out further, so it doesn't put the nice ring on it. Now, when I want to turn on centers to turn it around, I can. Now, when I want to turn it to off center, I can put a point on, I'll use one of these corners as a reference, and say I'll put that in there, and I'll put this one in here, roughly, but I'll put it in the ring mark. Now I've got a center line and I've got my off center and it's on this point. And if I go end per end on this point, I've got a live center and I've got another center and it's roughly lined up with that point. And I didn't have to measure anything. And I can make 100 of these and they'll all be exactly the same. And if you wanted to get really fancy and put a three-sided handle on it, well, you just pick 2 more points and do the same. I found that just using 2 points works. One of the things I have found, and I don't know if I brought one of the handles, well, I think the little handle with the wire burner in it, I ended up putting marks exactly opposite each other off center. Okay, so now I got 3 points, one here, and one there. Same on this side. When I turned that handle, I went on to this point on this one and this point on this side, so that you end up with a little bit of wobble. And that gives you a different shape on the handle. And you can adjust that to your hand however you like. So without further ado, I'm going to set this in here and we're going to turn this round. Oh, another thing before we move on. Some people would say, well, that's not enough offset. Is there a knockout bar here? Do we have a knockout bar?
I think it's in the box.
I think it's in the top part of the box.
Okay, I'll go grab it. I thought I brought everything I would need, but I forgot a knockout bar. Of course, my knockout bar might not fit this little. So as I said, some people would say, well, that's not quite enough. So what then I do is I'll take one of these Storby centers. And you'll notice that the ring grooves on it are a little bigger than the safe drive. So if I put this in here, put this on. Now, hopefully you can see those little holes, the little divots. Well, now you've got all these little divots, you can pick whichever one you want. So you can go, you knock yourself out. You could try each one and see what ends up happening. But it also gives you the little bit of a wider circle, and you didn't have to measure anything.
You want to comment in general, Bert, about how much offset you might use in offset spindle turning?
I think a lot of times that would probably depend on the size of the project, because the farther you get off center, the more exciting it can be. That piece that I sent around that we did with Huslock that has the real far offsets, that was like 1.5 inches off center. And when you first turn it on, it's pretty spectacular. So if it scares you, it's just about right? But one of the things too with offset turning, especially when you're turning a lot of air, speed is your friend. So you don't want to be working with great big pieces at high speed if it's offset. Smaller pieces are safer. You want to make sure you stand out of the line of fire while you're turning it on, and always be conscious that it is offset turning and you are turning some air So your tool is touching wood, then it's touching air, then it's touching wood. And if you push your tool in too hard, it would grab in here and it might try and take the tool out of your hand. So I would say start with a small amount of offset until you're comfortable with what's happening. And then as you get more adventurous and have another project in mind, you can adjust it and see where it goes. The best book I've ever seen for explaining and helping offset turning is written by Bert Delisle. And I mean, she goes through exactly how this works, and she's documented it. And it's a real boring read if you read it cover to cover. But I've probably read that book 10 times, one page at a time. I'll look at a chapter of what I'm trying to do, and I'll read that chapter, and then I'll go do it. Because she covers so many things and so many opportunities, and she's really, she's actually on YouTube as well. She does a really good job of getting some of the science or the scariness out of offset turning. So, without further ado, we'll turn this around. And I didn't bring a big tool rest, so I'll just move this tool rest back and forth. Face shield, take a moment. How many people have seen my video about why it's important to wear a face shield? If you want to see what a face shield can help you do to protect you, just watch my video on YouTube on, I think it's called an urn failure. I was turning an urn and it exploded. And the face shield took the brunt of it. I had a phone in my pocket, it bent my phone, and that was it. There was nothing else happened. It's pretty spectacular. So I wear a face shield even with small things, because stuff like this can be really small, but they're sharp, and if they hit you in the face, you don't want to get any blood on your lathe. It's so hard to clean, right? So, and your face shield's not your first line of protection either. Your face shield is your last line of protection. Your first line of protection is make sure that it's not hitting your tool rest. Start your speed slow. Bring your speed up and you're out of the line of fire. We're between centers, so I like to turn fast. I turn it as fast as I'm comfortable with. Speed is your friend when you're doing air turning. Takes a little getting used to. Angle the tool, load the rollers. So that's my safety moment for safe drive. If I would have been a square drive, I did that on purpose. If that would have been a square drive, chances are the piece of wood would have come apart in multiple pieces. And with the safe drive, it encourages you to take finer cuts and have sharper tools. And if you make a mistake, the wood just stops. And if it gets too loose, tighten it up a little bit. And I almost did what I normally do in my shop is I move my tool rest when it's still running. But because this is, especially because this is a different lathe and I don't know how sticky the lathe bed would be, I'll stop the lathe before I move it. Let's pull the looking glass and pull the looking glass for the reason. I didn't put the roughing down. I wasn't worried about how smooth it is with the roughing gouge. Although a roughing gouge can give you a real nice finish, what I like to do is I like to use a skew to do a nice finish. Now the double. And the tool cut in both directions. I'm doing there is I usually put a mark on the end of each of the whatever the project is, because anything on this side of it's going to be waste. But I leave enough on there so I can still move my offset turning. So on this particular one, if this is going to be a handle and we don't want it to roll around, I'm probably going to just go with 2 centers starting on this side, which would be the same side on this one, and we rotate the piece so it's not touching the tool rest. And then we can shape it. And this is going to be a little bit rounded on this side, and then I'm going to change to the other side and do another cut on that side. And then we'll go back to centers and finish the ends. So again, because it's off center, out of the line of fire, start it up, bring your speed up, make sure this is tight, and you lock it. So we're going to be turning air about half the time. And so I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. I can kind of see where the solid wood and the base wood is. There's going to be center. I'm going to turn it down. I'm going to turn it down about there. So we've got this is rounded off a little bit. It's a little bumpy here in the center, but I think that's not too bad for what I'm looking at. I'm going to smooth that out a little bit more. I'm going to take a bowl gouge, and I just like the bowl gouge because it's got a little bit more cross section. A spindle gouge would work just as well. Okay, we're going to take that, take a look at it. There's half a handle. Sometimes people might like that. It'll still roll, but it's got a little bit of weight off to one side. So now I've got to take it to the other side, and it's easy to tell where you've been because when you pushed it in, you got the rings on both sides. So I want to know. I want to go to the other side. And your tool rest should probably be the same. If it's the same piece of wood, if the two offsets are the same distance apart, your tool rest is probably okay. I'm just centering it.
Eric, something tells me that you could run out of material.
Oh, you can. You can if you go past center,
Yeah.
which is really, well, I'll fire it up and we'll be able to see if you can see the ghost image. Can you see the ghost image? So you can see that it looks like it's really thin. And you're probably right, I may have gone a little too far. So this is kind of the fun of putting the offset there. So when it goes in the center, I work my way there, and we'll come up to this side. And we'll come down. All the closing down here. 4 drive or a 4-prong drive, you probably will be picking up any piece of wood. This one's about ready to come apart. No, it's not quite apart. Your comment about pretty soon running out of wood, yeah, I'm running out of wood here pretty quickly. Right? But the idea for this was now we go back between centers. So this is basically shaped to whatever your hand is. Yep, Jeff?
For any beginners in the room, I don't know if you heard Bert say that he always cut downhill. So when you see him cutting, he's cutting down the slope. You never cut uphill, you'll get a catch for sure.
Yeah.
Then there'll be a problem.
So on here you might be able to see the arc here. And so I'm cutting from the center down. I have to cut downhill this way, and I'm cutting downhill this way. But now that I've basically got my shape and I'm back between centers, so now I'll take a spindle gouge. I could have used a bowl gouge as well, but I'll use a spindle gouge and just clean this up a little bit. I just wanted to round the sharp edges off of here. I don't want to go all the way down into there. I just wanted to get the sharp edges. If this was going to be a handle in my shop, I would probably take 80 grit sandpaper and rough it up a little bit. Because I don't want it to be perfectly smooth if I'm using it for a tool handle for a drill or for a wire burner. But now that we're between centers, I can fix the ends up. I could have taken that down a little bit further. Let's just try it. I didn't have to take it out of the drive centers to move it. I was just too lazy to use the tool rest. Another reason why I swapped it end for end is that this is the drive end, and if this was getting too weak, and I'm cutting on this end, driving it from here, and this was weak, it could fly out. So by swapping it around, now I'm driving it through this big piece of wood here to where I'm cutting, and this stuff is just going along for the ride. So I would shape this however I wanted to, get a little nicer shape than this. This isn't very pretty, but the whole object of the exercise was to show that now this has a handle that's wider than the ends, and I'm going to part this off. I usually turn the speed down a bit when I'm parting. I guess I didn't part that off far enough. Now there's a handle that it won't roll anywhere. Right? So the key part about the handle not rolling anywhere is this part should always be bigger than the ends. So you turn whatever shape is comfortable in your hand, and when you go back to centers, just make sure this diameter is slightly smaller than the major diameter. You can put whatever tool you want in it when you put it on the table. It won't go anywhere.
Would you drill your hole for your tool before you turn it?
Oh, you can. A lot of times you've already got the mark on there, so you can drill it on a drill press. Right? If you drill it beforehand, you got to make sure it's small enough that your point of your live center will still find center. Yes?
Can you comment, Bert, about, for beginners, about parting off versus sawing off?
Yeah, we can. You'll notice that I was parting this off, and as I was parting it, when it got too tight, it bound up. Again, that's showing the advantages of using a safe drive, because then your wood project just stops and the lathe just spins. This thing doesn't catch anything. If you're parting off down to, say, 1/4 of an inch and stop, then there's nothing wrong with stopping and getting a thin saw and just cutting them off. I guess that's a fair point, Jeff. I've turned so much and parted off so many things. I do it by second nature. Normally I'll just part it off and I'll even drop it off in my hand. That comes with experience. So for new turners, yeah, if you're not comfortable with it, make sure when you're parting it that you part in and then move over and part a little more width so that your tool doesn't bind. And then as you get close enough to the center that you're comfortable with, just get a saw and cut it off.
I'll add to that.
Yep.
Like say with lots of experience, you can basically part right, and I do that all the time, part right through,
Yep.
and you get a nice clean cut. If you look at that piece, you notice when we're twisted off,
Yep, it's
a lot
got
of
time.
times you're going to get a less, and I always make two cuts when I'm parting with the pin tool. And I do the final part off is away from the piece I want to keep. So there's actually a little tiny nub that you can sand off. Because if you twist it off, a lot of times you end up, you look back, there's a divot where the fire will pour out.
So we're going to try the soybean wobble chuck. What's going on here? Oh, there's a column key in here. So on a lot of these drives, there's an Allen key. And the Allen key is designed, this is a one-way adapter, and on a one-way lathe it has a groove for the Allen key to set into. But on a lot of lathes they don't have that, so the Allen key would go down and damage your threads on your spindle. So in this particular case I took the Allen key right out because I don't want to leave it loose, because if I leave it loose it'll come out when it's spinning and I don't know where it's going to go, so I take it out. And I'm only turning in this direction, so all of my action on the wood is trying to tighten it. So this wobble chuck is it'll fit in a regular chuck, and it has this one actually right now just has a 1/4 inch woodworm screw. That comes standard with it. So I need to open this up to the wobble chuck is not won't fit in a standard 50 millimeter jaw set. It's a little smaller, and I didn't bring my 35 millimeter chuck, but this is the one that I normally use. This is a little record power SC2 chuck. So that's on straight. That's the on center. So here's the piece of wood we're going to do. That little lamp, tea light lamp, started out on a piece of wood like this, and I just screwed it onto the wood chuck or the woodworm screw. Of course, the screw is actually fairly long, so I have to make sure that when I'm turning something like this, I allow for it. So that screw is in there about 1 inch or a little better. So there's going to be a hole in the end of my project when I'm done on this project, but that's okay because it is a demonstration piece. If I wanted to make something that didn't have a hole in it, well, I would just make sure that I end my piece 1 inch up and then part it off. But I don't want to waste the wood, and if it's just a little tea light and it's going to sit on the table, a lot of times I would make another contrasting wood disc and glue it on the bottom, which would cover the hole anyhow, so I don't worry about it and I don't waste all this wood. And I like to bring up the tailstock, not really tight, just so there's support, so that when you're turning out here, it's trying to pry this off of the screw. You don't want it to pry off. So the first step is turn this around. Get rid of any defects, get rid of any wood that you don't want. On this particular one, I just noticed there's a crack in here. So there's a possibility that that might affect what my end project's going to end up being. But for this exercise, what we're trying to show is that the wobble chuck allows you to do a whole bunch of things, and it's only your imagination that limits what you can do with it. And so when I did the quick practice session on it, I just made a little tea light. Maybe I'll try and do the same thing now. Again, turn your speed down, start it up, stand out of the line of fire. We're on a screw here, we're on a point here, it's fairly safe. It's fairly small diameter. You use the simple rocket motor for the bolt holes that really you're comfortable with to knock the corners off. Okay, again for this one now we get to the point where we want to do some design. Well, I'm thinking if we're going to make a tea light, I need to mark off where the bottom of the tea light's going to be. Then we'll get rid of the tailstock and we'll hollow out where the tea light's going to go. Then we'll bring the tailstock back up and we can do a little bit of surfacing on the outside, and then we'll move this around. So where was that crack? Looks like I got rid of the crack. Was here. It looks like it's gone now. So let's hollow this out. turn the speed down, and then we'll see where it goes. We'll bring the speed up. Now because we're hollowing and we're way out, away from the chuck, way from the headstock, I have to really be careful that we don't take big cuts. If this demonstration is going to go sideways, it will probably do so in the next 3 or 4 minutes. So, we'll just try it and see what happens here. We're starting on center. Little nice light cuts. You get the idea. I'm not going to hollow much more than that because we're basically just hollowing the piece. The intent was to show that we can do it. And now the fun part starts. So we want to loosen this off. There's 2 set screws in here. One here and one here. And when you'll notice that there's a line up on here. That's on center. So you loosen these off, and then you can rotate it this way, or you can rotate it that way. I put a mark on here, that's 5 degrees. 5 degrees gives you a lot of offset. What I've done a lot of times to just get used to the tool is use this mark and kind of line it up with the set screw. Then it's not quite as aggressive. And make sure both set screws are tight. And then make sure when you rotate this, can you see how much it's wobbling? So you want to make sure that your tool rest is clearing. Now is when you got to decide what you want to do with the object. You can. What I have found is I always start with the offset turning first and get down to where I think I want to stop, and then do that on both sides or both offset turnings. And then when I'm done with playing with the different offsets, I go back on center and I use the on center turning to blend this piece back into the offset. I don't know if that makes sense right now, but it might once we get started here. And of course, you can do this kind of offset turning between centers. I think this is another thing I wanted to show. I make a lot of these kinds of jigs. This is just a push block. It's just a block with 3/4 10 threaded. Put this in here. Screw this onto the live center. And on these ones I put a little, oh, that's not very straight. What's going on? Well, it's not really. The point is, usually these, I might have it cross-threaded. Normally they screw in all the way in nice and straight, and then the back of this block will seat up against the back of the screw so that the block is straight. There. So I want this block to be backed up against, well, it's still wobbling. Well, it'll probably do for this, for what I'm trying to do. Because I put a little piece of rubber on here, I'm just bringing this up so it's in contact. It's not having any pressure. What it's doing for me is it's making sure that if this decided it wanted to go someplace, it can't fly away. Oh, that will do. So you don't want this up tight. I put a piece of rubber on here specifically for that reason, so there's a little bit of give.
You lost your own.
So we're back at it again. So the object here now is for me to do some offset cuts at one side of the wobble. So I'm going to make a V cut in here and one this way. So we'll start off slow. Bring the speed up. And again, speed is your friend when you're going fast, or when you're putting work, but within reason. So again, can you see the ghost image in there? You can see where the solid wood is. You don't want to go past the solid wood, you just want to go in through the solid wood. And you can hear it when it's cutting there, it's kind of flipping. It's coming downhill. We're coming here, we're coming downhill. Now we're going to switch to the sticker valve. And the sticker valve has a little bit longer point, makes it a little easier to get in a little deeper. Getting closer to the solid wood. So it's always nice to stop and take a look. And you can see it's got a fairly nice cut here. This is a little bit torn out and ragged, but that's okay because I'm going to fix this face up when I go back on centers. But I'm down to, there's about half of the wood. I can take a little bit more out of here. Okay, so we've got what we think is a fairly nice V-cut there. We can turn around and move this, loosen this one, loosen this one, back this off a little. And I'm going to move this over to the other side now, just in line with the screw on the other side. Just because I can. There's no real reason why I went there, it's just because I can. Again, we'll check and make sure that we've got clearance. We've got lots of room here, so. And we'll go again. And this time we're going to go on this side of the groove, and we're going to make another V-cut on this side. Coming downhill from both sides. And then we can stop and take a look and see where our progress is. So we can see we're just barely touching the point here, and we've got a lot of material we could take off here. So the object here is to try and get a nice crisp line between this face and this face.
Are you through with your tailstock?
Yeah, the tailstock is, yeah, I was basically through with it. I could bring it up just so it's some support, but it's, I'm closer to the chuck now. So there's less prying action. But the tailstock's there, like there, just barely, just touching on the rubber. If it did try and go someplace, it can't really go anywhere. So we got a little bit of a flat here, and we're nice and sharp here, so we'll just take it a little bit further. So we're getting a little closer. There's just a little bit of a flat here. And my target for some of these is just to have a nice crisp edge all the way around. Little bit of a flat. There, that's got a nice crisp edge all the way around. Just going to clean the bottom up just a little. So now if I was going to sand this, call it this cut finished, I would sand it now and get it to the whatever finish I want. And now we can take this and move this. We could take it, but for this demonstration, we'll just take it back to center and we'll smooth off the bottom and the top, and we'll move on to the next chuck. Okay, so now we're back between centers. We're on center line. So now I can take this one down to clean up the edge that I want on the top, and I can also shape the bottom if I want to put a cove or something in here to accent the angles we've got here. We could do that at this time too. Because it's between center, I'm going to bring the speed up a little. So I can see I'm coming up pretty close to where I want to be. And I've got to clean up the underside as well. There, so that's getting fairly close. And as you can see, we've straightened out the bottom of this chalice or tea light holder body, and we can smooth this off, and we can shape the bottom however we want the bottom to be shaped. So any questions about the wobble chuck? Yeah. Oh, I can take it apart and show you that. Absolutely, no, absolutely. Like I said, anybody that's got a little bit of mechanical stuff and you have a lathe, you can make this stuff really, really easy. I didn't have the stuff available, and I happened to be in the UK, and I was at the Robert Sorby factory. And of course, when I was there, it was shiny, and I'm like a raven. If it's shiny, it goes in my toolbox. But they gave me a good deal, because when you're buying things in the UK as a Canadian citizen, there's no VAT, which was 25%. And if you're buying it UK as a Canadian citizen, you're allowed to bring in $800 duty free. So to buy this over there would have been close to 100 pounds. And I was at the Sheffield Woodturners Guild so many times when I was over there checking factories. They gave me honorary membership, which gave me 10% off at the Robert Sorby factory. That's how they feed their ravens, right? That's how they feed their ravens. No, come up and take a look at it if you want. And it's, I'll just pop this over there. Go ahead, take it. Here. No, I can take that up. That's the wobble chuck. Oh, okay. Sorry? He might. You want to know if they're taking orders?
We have to establish the price.
We just heard 100 pounds, so that's
That's what, 150?
everybody weighs at least 100 pounds. That's the price.
Oops. I keep forgetting my chucks are 1 1/4 inch, and this lathe is M33. So. So this little object here is called the Axminster chuck. As I said before, it's got 4 offsets here and 12 positions. It fits inside a standard 50mm jaw. And I bought this from Axminster. I think it's in Stockroom Supply in Ontario. Stockroom Supply, I think, handles it. It's called the Axminster offset chuck. But they had a sale on one time, and we had a demonstration from the fellow from Axminster a year or 2 ago, and this is one of the things they were talking about. So I ordered it. Again, it was shiny, but I've only used it a couple of times. And on those samples that I sent around, I did some of them yesterday, and I was just having a blast because it's so simple and it's repeatable. And what I wanted to do is I've got a piece of wood that I've just double stick tape onto here. And when I make the marks and I change it, and I want to go back to the first mark, because everything is indexed and it's screwed together, it goes back perfectly centered. Where on a wooden chuck, it's really difficult to get back exactly on center. So this little chunk of wood's on here. It's just double stick tape on there. And we'll show it to you in action. Because a lot of times looking at the little disc, you kind of wonder how the heck does that actually happen? Well, we'll show you. So this is here, speed down, on center, start up, run the speed up. I'm just going to face this off. what we do now is we loosen these screws. And if there was going to be one thing that I'm going to send them a note to, is that in order to take this piece and move it, you basically got to take it out of the chuck. And I'll show you why in a second. Because you have to loosen these screws. So on this side there's only one screw, so I just loosen it. On this side there's a series of screws, or a series of threaded holes. So we loosen this off and take the screw right out. So we take the screw right out, and then we can move it over into whatever number of holes you want. So I'm going to move it over to probably the third one, it's a little more dramatic. So I've taken this, went from 0, moved it over 1, 2, 3 in the third hole. Now we put this back on the chuck. The chuck is dovetailed and this is dovetailed. So this has to be screwed tight, the parts have to be screwed tight together so that when you place it on the chuck jaws are seating against the metal part of the Axminster chuck.
What is the name of that chuck?
It's Axminster off-center. So now you can see how far this thing is wobbling off-center. So we'll just go up here and what I normally, if I had a pencil, I guess I could put a pencil mark, but we'll just use my trusty point tool. Point tools work best if they're close to being on center. And I don't want to go off the outside, so I want to come inside here just a little bit. About there should work. You can tell how off center it is because it wants to shake the lathe. I don't know if you'll be able to see that just yet, but we'll do this again. Like I say, this is probably the only part of this particular chuck that I mean, it works, and it works really, really well. It's just if I was making 50 or 60 of these, I'd like to be able to just take these two screws off and move it without having to take it off the chuck. But that's just me. I'm attention deficit. So what I'm going to do is I moved that 3 holes to the one side. I'm going to go back to 3 holes on the other side. So you can see this groove is off center by that far. But I moved it now to the 3 holes on the opposite side. And we'll just see what that does. I'm not sure. I'll double check. And you're absolutely right. Just checking to see if you're paying attention. Again, so you can see why it would be handy to have the ability to have this locked in the chuck and then not have to worry about it. Then all you have to do is move the screws. But it is what it is. So. And now we'll do the same on, we'll try to do something the same on here. And I was about a 1/4 inch away from the offside, so I'm trying. If I wanted to be super accurate, I would put a pencil mark on there and know exactly where it is, but for the demonstration, we'll just try this. So there you can see by moving it to the third hole on the opposite side. And you could go around incrementally and do each one of these. Now the nice part is that we've got these holes offset. Now we can go to the center. You always make sure that this hole is a different size. No, that's the big one for the chuck. So this is taking the center screw. If you loosen it off, and on this particular one, I've marked them. I don't know, can you see the numbers around here? 1, 2, 3 on the circumference. They might be hard to see. But there's a little index line here. Right now it's on 0. But you can lift this up and you can turn it and it fits on a pin. And now I tighten the screw up and it'll move that center around. So I moved it one groove. And we'll try this. So you can, if you remember what the grooves look like, we'll try it with this offset by 1/4. I'll see if I can get on this groove right there. What's that? There's nothing loose, that's just this thing shaking. Because it's off center, the whole lathe is shaking, so anything that's loose on the lathe will make a rattle. Yeah. No, not really. These are big. So you can see the first one was here, the second one was here, and now the offset has moved this one off a little bit. And we could go all the way around, like that one disc that I showed earlier. You can keep going around one at a time and make whatever kind of designs you want. And the beauty of it is, if you made this fairly flat, you can pry it off the double stick tape, turn it around, and make a completely different design on the other side. And one of the things I've done is I used the chatter tool on some of it. This one's already buggered, so you probably can't use it. I'll turn it on. And I'll put it back to center, I'll turn it off, and we'll use a chatter tool on it. I don't want to put a chatter tool on something that already has a bunch of grooves because I don't know how severe the bite might be. Something is really loose there, isn't it? That's why you got to make sure you always rotate things by hand before you turn the lathe on. Actually, is there any more questions on this Axminster lathe? Because I don't know, how are we doing for time? Well, how much time have I got? Okay, so is there any more questions on the Axminster chuck on how it works? Okay. And we'll call that one good. I got one other chuck here that I bought several years ago that it's kind of unique. I don't even think they make it anymore, or I haven't seen it advertised. But it's an off-center chuck. That screws in this one.
For any beginners, the set screws that Bert was talking about, lots of times when you're sanding, you sand towards yourself the way the lathe normally goes. But sand in reverse. Just to pick up any of the fuzzies. Back and forward. If you're not careful sanding in reverse, you go the rest of it, you'll find yourself holding the work. There's a lot of screws. But professional guys who do this coming to the meetings all the time, any piece they put on the lathe, they do up the set screw every time. And they're usually big heavy pieces.
But Jeff, aren't you in the habit of sanding completely off the lathe?
Well, I don't finish it off. Sanding every one of them.
I don't remember your response when Ed Pritchard said that Turner's got to get off sanding on the lathe. That's sad by hand. Your heart just broke.
Yeah. No, he's from the West Coast, so he's pretty.
Yeah, I guess so. Normally I just don't get on that tight. So now this next chuck is it's a PSA chuck, and it screws onto a 1-inch lathe. And there's a nut on here. And there's a set screw here. To adjust it in or out. So we can take this set screw here and we can rotate this, and it actually moves this bolt in or out from center. Then you mount your chuck on here. When you get it to the offset that you want, you lock your chuck on here, and that gives you the offset. So right now it's pretty much close to center. So if I screw this in, you can see that the chuck should wobble. I'll go the other direction. Just the center point. This one just changes the center point. So There, now you can see the offset. This will definitely make the lathe shake. So if you put a piece of wood in here, and if it was a big project, it will definitely make your lathe shake. And it's only relying on the friction of this chuck pulling on the bolt to hold everything on the offset. And it's a little hard to go back to exactly the same offset. So if you wanted to make something and do an offset and then change it and do something else, that's fantastic. If you try to make the second one, it's really hard to get it exactly the same because there's no indexing on it on what the offset is.
You have to count the turns in your set screw.
You have to, yes, yeah, yeah. But yeah, it definitely, it'll definitely shake the lathe. Something loose on the loop. So that's just a second here. So this chuck here, like I say, I don't think is even available anymore. But again, it was another one of those shiny objects that when it came out, and I got it a hell of a good deal because they had it on sale, regular 146 bucks, and they had them on sale for 75. So again, it's just feeding the ravens, right? It doesn't matter what the numbers are, it's shiny. I feel like a raven, I just take it home.
So in essence, the duck truck that you showed first, Jim Duxbury came up with that wood one.
Yeah,
That's this.
yeah.
Except it's made out of wood, so you don't have the mass as a problem rotating. And you can index it across, like he's got markings across for your jaws, and it's so cheap to make, no shiny stuff. But it works just the same, except you gotta glue your work on.
So here's another part of that same chuck, which is really, really simple. This is an aluminum block, and it's threaded with a bunch of offsets. It screws on here, and this is primarily designed for these other two attachments, which is the ones that I've used the most rather than the chuck. If you want to turn a pen that has multi-access, it's got a pen mandrel. It'll screw in on the center, it'll screw in on any one of these offsets, so you can make a multi-sided pen using this chuck, which is really handy. You can also use this little adapter, which is for doing bottle stoppers. And the beauty of this is if you pick an offset and you put a bottle stopper on here, and with any luck at all, I probably have a lot of wood that has a hole in it already. We can demonstrate this one. So this is just your standard 3/8 inch. Well, they use them for wine bottle stoppers. So I screwed this thing on to the bottle stopper, but it's wobbling around, and I don't want to wobble it around when I'm taking the rough corners off, so I put it on center. Okay? Use the live center on here because it is all fairly small pieces and we're hanging out, and taking the corners off of a square block of wood does a lot of hanging, so I don't want to lose it off the thread. So again, when pardon?
Is that chuck still available?
This is just the block that came with that one, and I think Niles sells one that's like this, but it's a block of aluminum. And if you center punch it and drill and tap it, aluminum drills really, really easily. And the metal supermarket will sell you aluminum. No piece is too small. So if you wanted a piece of aluminum this size, they'd cut it for you, and then you just take it home and drill it and tap it for whatever offsets you like to work with. This one just happens to have a bunch on it, and again, it came with that chuck. So.
Don't worry about it being cut in the metal, because all your wood tools will turn the aluminum.
That's right, yeah. So now we're going to take this again and knock the corners off. Bringing the speed up. So I don't know if you noticed that little clip there. That's the next feature on this that is really cool. So I'm just going to go off to, this is the closest offset. I'm just going to do it because it's easy, less dramatic. It does have an offset that's way out here. I can tell you that gets exciting when you use the one that's way out here. It can get really exciting. So I usually set my tool rest so that it's clearing by, well, 1/8 of an inch. And again, I like to use a bowl gouge just because I've got a big handle on it, it's heavy mass and good cross section. I can control it a lot easier. Notice I'm not using a tool stop on here. A really light cut. Okay, so it's got a nice little shape on one side here. Now if I want to shape the other side, how the heck do I do that? Well, with this thing here, you just pull it out and turn it. There you go. Now we turn the next one. So that cut a second one, and I can't remember which way I turned it. But that's the fun part, is if you can't remember what you did, just get another piece of wood. Yeah.
What's inside is a pin that just goes to different holes? Or?
Yeah. I forget how many there are on here. It looks like 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3. Looks like it. Yeah, 1, 2, 3 one way, and 1, 2, 3 the other way. And I'll take that side off just for the heck of it. So there's the 4 different little shapes that you can get on it. And this thing will go almost an inch out of center. So that gets pretty spectacular. So we did those on the closest off center. And again, the idea here is not to make a finished project, it's just to show that there's lots of options for people to use. And a lot of these things you can make yourself. And you can do the same thing by making yourself a chuck and drilling a hole in it and putting, gluing a block on. You can get a block of wood and just screw your block on off center. You can. And that duck's chuck would do the same as what this is doing as well, like you can. So, but there are commercial ones available. Any questions?
Looks fun.
Was it a worthwhile effort?
Yeah, that's good. Thanks, Bert.
Oh, and for those of you that may be interested, I made this handle, and I use a machinist collet. The collet is the same size as my bowl gouge. And so that means I can stick my bowl gouge in here, tighten it up, and it works like a bowl gouge, and I can carry 2 or 3 bowl gouges with me, loosen it off, pull it out, put another tool in, and go with one handle. And because I only brought 1 bowl gouge today, it made it really, really handy for carrying it. I don't have to worry about stabbing myself because I just put it in upside down, and it's wood in here. So
what you call that machine?
this is it's a collet holder for a milling machine, but you got to remember that these are hardened, and so you have to anneal it. So I went out to Jack's not here tonight, but I went out to Jack's and took a propane torch and heated the hell out of this metal until it turned blue. And then when I let it cool slowly, I just took a regular drill and drilled a hole out 1/2 inch so that my tools would fit. Because the collet in here will hold the tool, but the hole inside the collet holder was smaller than 1/2 inch, so I had to drill it out so that I could get the handle in. But because this is a hardened piece of steel, I had to take a little bit of time to anneal it.
Jeff said he'll thread anything you want there on mild steel.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, absolutely. This piece already machined with the collet was $35, and I made the handle. So, I mean, if you go to try and buy a collet handle, Stu, what did you pay for yours?
It's for, it comes from Stuart Batty, I
Yeah.
called it. I bought them from Walter's Arsenal.
Okay, yeah.
Set of 3. But I couldn't figure out where they came from. And I finally tracked it down since you were looking into this. But Stuart Batty makes it, and they have changed their design now from what I have got. But it's very similar, it's interchangeable.
Do you remember what they cost?
I don't.
I was
Very
in
expensive.
the neighborhood of $150.
About 100 and a half a handle.
Yeah, a handle. And so,
I have 3 different sizes in it.
yeah, and so I have 3 different sizes of these too, because I have more than that. I've got 4 different sizes because
Then you just change the collet in.
I just changed this is a 1/2 inch collet for my bowl gouge. I get my 3/8 collet for my spindle gouges. So I've just got the collets for the different handles. And all the collets fit in this handle. So I can take all of my tools like this. So it's just kind of a handy.
I love the system, it works great.
The one-way handle, it just has 2 Allen screws and
Yeah.
2 different sizes.
Right.
Yeah. But this doesn't have any Allen screws. I've got some that have Allen screws too, and it always frustrates me when I have to go get another wrench to change a tool. This way I just pull it off and pop it back in.
That collet setup is great. Yeah.
So that's all I've got. And hopefully anybody wants to come up and take a look at this stuff, by all means, come on up and take a look. The other little chuck, wobble chuck, will you show up?